Hello there, welcome to a scrapbookpal.com video. I'm Cassie Trask, and I'm going to be showing you a Christmas card using some fun Avery Elle products, and we are going to go ahead and get stamping. So I'm going to ink up the Avery Elle Christmas Kids. I love this stamp, it's such a cutie. I'm going to put that inside of my mini MISTI, and I'll close the door to pick up the stamp. And then I'm going to ink that up with some Memento Tuxedo black ink. This is an alcohol marker friendly ink, and we're going to be doing some Copic coloring, so this is the perfect kind of ink for this. And I'm going to ink it up a couple times because I want to make sure that I have a very good, crisp, clean image for my coloring. And when we're done with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the coloring. So as I said, we're going to be doing some Copic coloring, and I know everybody colors a little bit differently. I'm going to put the colors up on the screen for you, but we're going to start with some G4-6 for our tree. And I always go lightest to darkest. This is just how I color best. I like to start with my lightest because in this case it puts down a good wash of color before I move on to my darker color, because by putting down that first layer of color, you kind of moisten the paper a little bit. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you moisten the paper a little bit and then your blending becomes a little bit smoother. Now, I know that some people go darkest to lightest and they don't have any problems with that, but it just doesn't work that well for me. So if you are finding that you're having a hard time with your coloring, try something a little bit different. So if you typically try to go darkest to lightest, try going lightest to darkest. Or if you go lightest to darkest and that doesn't work, try going the other way. So here I am layering my second color. And this was the BG96. I know those are colors that typically maybe wouldn't go together, but they work out pretty well. And then we'll move on to start coloring some of our little characters in here. So with these smaller characters, these smaller people, you wouldn't have to go too crazy with too much detail. In some cases I only use one color. You could go as detailed as you wanted though. So I'll use, for most color blends, I will use two colors. Like in this case, I'm going to start with the B37, and then I'll go back in with the B39 to darken up parts of those areas where I think there might be some shadowing. I don't really have any rhyme or reason or anything like that as to where my shadowing might be. I just put it where I think it might look best. And then we'll go on to do, I go all over the place, honestly, with my coloring. So I pull out some red at this point just to do his little scarf, and I'll start with R24, and then I will go in with R29 as my darker shade. And at this point I wasn't 100% sure what color I wanted each of the characters' outfits to be, but I will darken up some of those areas. So most of the color combos that I have chosen today they're really close to each other on the spectrum. If you look at them, like in this case, I'm going to use the E50. This one isn't very close to each other because you would think earth tones E50, she would go in with another E. But in this case, I'm going to go in with YR20. And I've only discovered that basically by experimentation and by practicing. So I've Copic colored for a number of years, probably since, I don't know, maybe at least 11 years I've done this. And oftentimes I will pick colors, especially for smaller images like this, I will pick colors that are close to each other. Like in this case, I'm using E23, and then I'll use an E25 just for a little bit darker. But when I'm coloring bigger images, like the tree, I will sometimes grab colors that are farther away on the spectrum to really add a lot of depth and interest. And then in this case, for some of these smaller images, I'm only using one color. So for his hair, I just used the E29, and for all of their shoes, I'll use the E29, but I won't put anything darker over the top of that. Because you can sometimes, not necessarily overdo it, but you know, you can put detail in an area and put extra time in an area where it isn't necessary, where somebody may not even catch it. You'll see it, but somebody else may not really catch it. And in some instances, I will just wait for the color to dry really well, like for the hair of the little blonde boy and the hair of the little almost redhead. I will let those dry, and then I'm going to come back in with that same color and go over the top of it. In this case, I'm just going over the top with the R22, and then I don't put this one up on the screen. This is R32. I do apologize, that one didn't make it up there. But Then just for a little bit of color, because I end up making him look like Fred, I think. Fred from Scooby-Doo. I do grab some C3. And then some smaller details. Like I said, you don't need to do 2 color blends unless you just really, really want to. But on the trunk, it's a bigger space. And so I will add the 2 color blends for sure. And even blend it out just a little bit. And then for this one, this is a little less traditional. We're using V95. I'm going to go over all of her clothes with that, even her little earmuffs. And then I'll come back in with a V17. So those don't look like they would go near each other at all, but they end up blending out okay. As a matter of fact, I think they look pretty good together. I think that's a color combo I will use in the future. And then we'll get ready now to do some die cutting. So I've got the matching die, and I'm just going to tape this down with some low-tack tape. And I love how easily these just line right up. And then I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. And here's how it looks. I even like how there's a little bit of extra detail for the little guy holding the candy cane. Next, we're going to grab some distressed woodgrain cardstock, and I'm going to run the Avery Elle Snow Scene die through my die cutting machine through that paper because I really like the detail of the woodgrain. And then I'll pop all the little snow pieces out, and then we're going to get ready to do some ink blending. I've got several colors of Distress Oxide. I'm going to start off with some Seedless Preserves on the bottom, and then we're going to move on to some chipped Sapphire. I really like how these two blend together. And I'm really liking how the wood grain is showing up in that background. And then when I'm happy with that, just blending back and forth using my mini ink blending tools, I'm going to come in with a little bit of black soot just around the outside where the blue is, and then I'll blend that out just a little bit more. And then I'm going to move on to grabbing some Perfect Pearls. I love Perfect Pearls. If you've never tried them, you really should. And I'll just spritz a little bit of water on those Perfect Pearls and use my paintbrush to splatter that all over my background to add either make it look like stars or more snow. And then I'm going to heat that till that is dry. And look at that shine. I love how that shines in the light. Now for my card base, I just have some white cardstock, and I'm using my Score Buddy to score that at 4 1/4 inches. So this will be a top folding A2 size card. And I have a piece of black cardstock that I'm running a powder bag over, and I'm going to ink that up with some VersaMark ink, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment and cover that with some embossing powder. It says time to trim the tree. And then I'm going to heat that till that is smooth and melted. And then I'm going to trim that down, and we're going to get ready to start doing some assembly. So I'm using the Tombow Mono adhesive. Love this adhesive. It's one of my favorites. I started off using this stuff. And then I'll put that down on my card front. And then I'm going to use these 3D foams squares for all over the back of my little people carrying their tree. So I'll put those all over the back, being pretty generous. And then I'll take all those little papers off the back. These are some great little foam strips. And then I'm going to stick those down right over our little snowy scene. And then I'm going to also trim down my sentiment a little bit more, and I'm going to put some more foam squares on the back of that because I want that to be popped up as well. And then we'll peel off that backing paper. And then we will adhere that as straight as we can. I don't always get it very straight. And then we will turn that over and trim off the excess. I wasn't very fond of how those little kids were just kind of floating on the paper, so I do grab my C3 Copic marker, and I just very sketchy draw in some snowbanks in the background so it looks like they are running across the snow. So this is super easy. You wouldn't have to be an artist at all to be able to do that. And now I'm going to put it back into my MISTI. This one's my bigger MISTI. And I'm going to line up that stamp on the inside so that I can finish off my inside. I'm going to grab some Distress Oxide in the color Bundled Sage, and then I'm going to stamp that down so that it's light enough that you still could write over the top of it if you wanted. And then I'm going to put the sentiment right there over the top as well, and that says Happy Holidays, and I'll ink that up with some black soot Distress Oxide ink. just because that'll stamp a lot easier over another Distress Oxide. And I'm not sure if you noticed, but along the way I did smudge some of my ink, so I'm going to grab out my mono sand eraser for those. This tool is like critical for any crafter. Yeah, I smudged some of that, and so this stuff works out great. It just kind of lightly erases that ink for you, and then you don't have to worry about it, so you don't have to throw away your projects. I even did it on the outside. So once we're done with that, that's actually going to finish off this card. I love how this turned out, and those little images are so darn cute. If you're interested in any of the items that I used today to make this card, you can find it all at scrapbookpal.com. And I thank you so much for stopping by.